Wednesday proved to be quite the day for fans of Charlotte FC. Patrick Agyemang scoring his second goal as a member of the U.S. men's national team. Of course, the day started with it becoming official. Wilfried Zaha is a member of the mighty Black and Blue. I'm bringing in our good friend, and today I'm going to call him Wilfried Palaszczuk. Willie P, Will Palaszczuk from WFNZ and the voice of Charlotte FC. How goes it, my friend? Let's start with the Zaha news. What a moment for this club. Can you just put into perspective how massive of an acquisition this is?
Well, this is the highest profile player they've ever brought in by far. And that's not to denigrate any of the players that they brought in. I think they all were great for the time they were brought in. I think Christian Fuchs was somebody who had a lot of Premier League experience and notoriety with what happened at Leicester. I think that was a very easy story for fans to get behind. But he was also at the back end of his career, and he's become a great club servant in that he's transitioned into a role on the team's coaching staff. He was the team's first captain. Karol Swiderski, the team's first designated player. I know we'll probably talk about his potential departure later, but he's somebody who, again, I think had a lot of notoriety in what I would call very soccer nerdy circles, but wasn't necessarily a player that the casual soccer fan would know worldwide. Even Tim Ream, who's somebody who I think maybe has more notoriety here than really internationally. Yeah, he played for Fulham, and yeah, he's played on the U.S. men's national team, but he's singularly important to people in this country. Wilfried Zaha is a worldwide name and somebody who I think has some real great repute, not just in England, but in Africa with his time with the Ivory Coast national team. He's also gotten a lot of attention internationally outside of those two continents. And really, when you think about Crystal Palace, they were really on the come up at the time that Wilfried Zaha really was coming into his own. He scored 68 Premier League goals in his 10 seasons while Crystal Palace was in the Premier League, 90 goals in his 12 seasons overall there. He came up from really a pretty rough background in South London. There was a big documentary, a couple big documentaries been made about just how, they played on cement and kind of in cages. Like it was kind of a rough background for a lot of people who grew up in that part of London. And Crystal Palace recognized him at age 12 after he moved from the Ivory Coast to London, I think around age 4. And they kind of brought him up through that academy. He spent a lot of time with that team and with that club and thought that the move to Galatasaray would kind of be that, that big boon move, the big money move. Did not prove out, ended up falling out of favor there for reasons I think were really beyond his really doing. So from that perspective, you kind of feel for him a little bit. He went to Lyon to try and get a potential return to form. Didn't necessarily find that to be a favorable solution either. So he comes to Charlotte FC with a lot of people asking questions about him. But the thing that I loved about this from Charlotte's perspective is that they worked a long time. They had their due diligence on this one going back about 3 months ago. And that's kind of when the legs started churning. Dean Smith had an interview with him while they were both in London. Zoran Krneta basically is as connected as anybody in the international soccer game. He mined all of his contacts in the Premier League and also abroad elsewhere. Basically say, hey, is this still the same player that he was at Crystal Palace? And by all accounts, they wouldn't have gone after him and made the investment in him if he wasn't going to be that player, or at least if they didn't believe he was going to be that player. He comes in with a swagger. He comes in with a fire. And I also think, too, he comes in with the kind of respect. And you heard Dean Smith talk about it earlier on Wednesday. The players have a different jump in their step knowing that a player of that nature is now in the club. There is as much a desire to play up to a certain standard to not only impress Zaha, but also to impress other people who might be watching Charlotte FC for the first time because of Zaha's connection to the club. And lo and behold, I've said this to other people over the course of the last couple of days as this news was starting to trickle out. I've heard more about this signing from people who I've not heard from for anything involving Charlotte FC than I've heard from anything we've done. And that's because, aside from maybe signing Dean Smith. Dean Smith, obviously, I think is the one catalyst that makes all this thing go. Zaha mentioned in our first chat with him a couple of days ago that Dean Smith was a big factor. The fact that he does have a certain aptitude, having coached in the English game, having coached in the Premier League, and done so to critical acclaim. I think a lot of players who want to come here, who are not coming here from a retirement league standpoint, they're coming here in the prime of their career. He's 32. I know 32 is not necessarily, 25, 26, 27, but we've seen players come over here in their early 30s and have a lot of success, and he's hoping to be the latest one to do that.
Okay, so you mentioned that 32 years old, obviously a star at Palace. That was a few years ago. Things seemed just a little bit uneven for him with his Turkish club and especially with Lyon in France. What type of goal scorer do you think Zaha could still be in Major League Soccer?
Well, he was a pretty prolific goal scorer right off the bat at Galatasaray when he first got his opportunity to play. He scored, I think, 9 goals in his first 16 starts, and then they just inexplicably stopped playing him. And again, they brought on a lot of players. Uh, I don't want to say anything necessarily bad about Galatasaray, the Turkish league, but they do business a little bit differently over there, and they brought in a lot of players at the same time, and they wanted to kind of see what those guys wanted to do, and it really took Wilfried Zaha somewhat out of the mind of the club and of the manager at the time. And so that's why I say things like he was maybe given maybe a bit of an unfair hand at Galatasaray and fell out of favor. And I don't think he's any different the player than he was at Crystal Palace, other than in age. And the thing about it is, people talk about his pace. He's not really the pacey guy. That's not what they're looking for him to do. They're looking for him to use his strength. He's a bigger dude. He's somebody who can really be very brawny on the left side. He can cut in, he can cut out, he can put through balls in. He can also do a lot of different things creatively with the ball. He kind of is as close to the full package as what you can possibly get as somebody who's a winger. And it's a different profile too than Charlotte FC has than any of its wingers. You've got the pacey winger in Liel Labada. You've got a tall guy who could be a target man like a Yuri Tavares. You've got Kerwin Vargas, who offers a little bit of that technical skill, but I think is still somebody who's a developmental type player. You've seen that, I think, from the way that the comments have been talked about with him when it comes to the way that his season ended. So I think he's somebody who you can definitely see the younger players learn from. But I also think, too, he's the kind of player who makes the difference in those 1-1 games and turns them into 2-1 victories. Maybe turns a deficit into a comeback draw. And also can just give you what Dean Smith called that little bit of stardust at the end of the contest that gives you that ability to be the differentiator. They have not had a player on the level of the top level MLS designated players. Those players are the ones that make the differences. The Cucho Hernandezes, the Hani Mukhtars, the Lionel Messis. I'm not saying he's on Messi's level necessarily, but what I am saying is he can have the kind of impact that those players have on their singular teams in any given match. And that's the kind of thing that separates teams that have a nice season to those who contend for trophies.
And speaking of that, expectations were high. They've just been on this kind of ladder of, rising every year with this club, especially after the deepest run in their history last year. Does this just kick it up a higher notch than it was Tuesday before it was official?
Well, it has to, Nick. It's interesting. Dean was asked directly that. I can't remember if it was you who asked him that directly or somebody else in our session with him earlier Wednesday, but he basically said that this puts us now in the challengers seat. Zoran Caneta went a step further. He says they now fully believe they have the ability to compete for trophies. Any competition they start, they are aiming to win a trophy. And I think that's something that's very important to the front office. It's very important to the organization. And you think you've seen the ambition in terms of the way that they did this. And also the move to potentially offload Karol Swiderski is not done just because you brought in Wilfried Zaha. It's because you now feel like you can bring in another piece, whether it's in this window or potentially in the summer, that can help you go for something even bigger down the line to try and get yourself fortified for a big stretch run. And whether or not that happens again in the next couple of days and couple of months, or if it happens in the summer, it just proves to me like they've been very intentional with their work to try and build this team. You heard Dean Smith talk about wanting a goal maker and a goal grabber. Well, you get Wilfried Zaha. You wanted somebody also who was a progressive ball mover up the midfield. They went and got Eric Williamson in an interleague move from Portland. They brought back Pep Biel on a very smart and shrewd non-designated player deal. And you also kept intact the best back line in Major League Soccer, the best goalkeeper in the league, and also a player in Patrick Agyemang, who, if you saw what happened on Wednesday night, there is no hotter player in American soccer right now than that guy because of 2 goals in his first 2 caps. Only the 12th player in the history of the United States men's national team who's done that, scored in his first 2 U.S. men's national team caps. Hasn't happened since Ricardo Pepi did it, I think, 3 years ago. So, or 4 years ago now, 2021. So from that perspective, you're definitely looking at a team that is hitting and firing on all cylinders. All they got to do, the ingredients are there, Nick. They just got to put the pie together, and that's the biggest challenge come February the 22nd because of the fact that the opening stretch of games for them is as ambitious of a stretch that they've seen since the opening season that they've played because they have to play at Seattle. You got to have Atlanta at home in a very, very tough grudge match in a game that features 2 teams that the road team has won each of the last 4. And you have Inter Miami looming on the following Sunday as well. It's not easy, but I think it's something where they recognized they need to have their ducks in a row so they can get all the visas in play, get everything ready to go, have these guys in and clicking on all cylinders by the time the season counts for real.
Does this change the identity, or how does this change the identity of how Dean Smith may want to play
Well,
tactically?
they want to dictate the terms more, Nick. I think
Yeah.
that's the big thing that, you know, I think Dean's team last year got a reputation of being a team that, oh, well, they just want to give the ball up and be a counterattacking and team that plays off of the other team's mistakes. It's not to say that they don't want to play that way as well. It's not to say that they're not going to be aggressive to try and get the ball back in dangerous areas and be that kind of team. But I think they also want to enjoy the football a little bit more as well. And I think one of the things that Dean did was that he melded the personnel to where he best thought the strength was. And he put a lot of pressure on that back line this past year. I think his desire this year is to maybe relieve some of that pressure with more play through the midfield and just give the defenses on the opposing side something more to think about. That's why you bring in a Wilfried Zaha, because it's going to mean Liel Labato's got freer runs in the box. It's going to mean that Patrick Agyemang's got freer runs in the box, and you cannot double team him with 2 center backs down the middle. Having Pep Biel in more of a natural central attacking midfield role also frees up things for the 2 wingers. So that's the thing I feel like they need to do is they need to ask more questions of defenses. And as something that has been said over and over by Dean Smith, when you get your chances, you have to take them. That was a big, big problem at the beginning of the year last year. Started to kind of even out and regress to the mean positively for Charlotte FC down the stretch. But ultimately, you're judged in this league by the way you finish your chances. And that obviously has to be a much different thing this year if Charlotte want to build on the promise of prosperity coming into 2025.
Well, such a big news day around this club. So now we shift to Karol Swiderski,
Mm-hmm.
who, listen, he's expressed his desire to play in Europe. He spent a spell away from this club before rejoining last year. He was, I believe, their first DP or their first
Yes.
prominent DP. He's their leading
Mm-hmm.
goal scorer of all time. What is his legacy here if this, transfer to this Greek club indeed happens? And how beneficial is it, though? You talked about being smart with Pep Biel and not making him a DP to have these open slots right now.
Well, I just hope that if it is the end for Carroll, that the fans have a positive outlook on him and they don't think about the, will he or won't he type moves at the end of windows or at the end of seasons, because I think genuinely he really did want to be here. And I think a lot of times the language barrier might have got him in a situation where there are a lot of factions that wanted him to play in Europe. Mostly when it comes to the Polish national team, they wanted him in Europe because they wanted him to play for the Polish national team because they want an heir apparent for Robert Lewandowski. Like that's an incredibly important thing for that country, and they felt that he was best served playing in Europe. Whether it's playing at a team that's not an MLS team or playing at a team that can be more easily accessible to go to ML to go to international friendlies, international call-up games, things of that nature. And for whatever reason, there was a kind of looking down from the people who are the Polish international fans on Major League Soccer. And I think there was a desire by Carroll, and this is my opinion, I'm not speaking for him, but I think there was a desire for Carroll to try to serve everybody. And I think in that particular in that particular vein, it made him appear wishy-washy when he really wasn't trying to be. He was trying to be everything for everybody. So I think he felt a certain loyalty to Charlotte FC. That's why he came back at the end of last year and why he came to training camp this year. But I think ultimately it came down to the fact that Charlotte FC wants Patrick Agyemang to be the future of this club. And that's the thing that I think that comes down to most often. And I think that's not necessarily an indictment on Karol. I think it also is the fact that Agyemang probably fits a profile of striker that Karol doesn't necessarily fit. I think we saw Karol really struggle to kind of play the type of striker that Dean wanted him to play. He got it eventually down the stretch. The Chicago game, he had himself a brace. He scored the playoff goal against Orlando, and I think that's an incredible moment, and a moment that should have gotten maybe a lot of higher acclaim, if not for the unfortunate decisions down the stretch by people who were not involved with Charlotte FC or Orlando. But I think that he will be remembered very fondly. I think time will heal the wounds of maybe the uncertainty around his will he or won't he leaving. And ultimately, he was a class player. I mean, he scored goals that no one else at this club has scored. You know, the rocket against Cincinnati, the comeback goal against Chicago. I was putting together an in case he departs Karol Swiderski montage and just look back on some of the many moments that we saw from him in his time with Charlotte FC. The two goals he scored against FC Cincinnati, one of them that might have caused one of the two of us to go viral on social media as a result of it. And also just, I think he was somebody who I think the players loved. I think they barely gravitated towards him. And I think too, I remember that first gathering in front of fans that the Charlotte FC people put on for him being the first DP. That was very special. That was a very special moment. He'll always have a special moment in Charlotte FC players and fans' hearts. He's one of the last links to the origins of this club, I should say. And I hope that he's looked upon fondly. I really hope he has a good rest of his career if, in fact, he's played his last game for Charlotte FC.
What about the timing of that potential DP slot opening and all of this, and Pep coming back as an international slot? What is the timing? How does that benefit this club right now? I mean, it's only January still.
So this can happen in a couple of different ways, Nick. And MLS put a roster initiative in the middle part of last year that I think kind of went under the radar with a lot of MLS fans. But you can carry your three DPs and have three under 22 initiative slots. And that's kind of the most conventional way you can have your roster built. If you want to carry only two DPs, you can earn a fourth U22 initiative slot and also get an extra, I think it's $200,000 in GAM, which is not a paltry sum. Maybe it's 2 million. I can't remember what the exact number is, but it's a hefty amount of general allocation money that can help you build the core of your roster. Yep. And there's a thought process that maybe Charlotte FC holds off on getting that third DP until the summer because they have a lot of allocation money that they have to tie up with a lot of players on their roster currently. Ashley Westwood's a high GAM player right now. Eric Williamson requires a lot of GAM, as does Tim Ream and as does Pep Biel. So the fact of the matter is, Charlotte FC might actually hold off on signing a DP in order to try and maybe fill out the greater core of this roster. I know that Dean Smith had said that they want to bring in another striker potentially as a body to be the backup striker for Patrick Agyemang. He mentioned Idan Tokulmadi is on the roster. Yuri Tavares has played striker as his Tiger Smalls. But I think they might go more either the domestic route or something maybe below the DP level to fill that spot. I don't know if they're going to fill the third DP spot before the end of the window. And it's not to say that they don't necessarily want to, but I think they want to leave that slot open, see how the season plays out, because it's not like they want to get a DP striker because they want to play Patrick Agyemang. And at the end of the day, you want your DPs to be in your most impactful positions. I don't think there's really a spot on this roster you can look at and fill a DP in right now, unless you got one at a unconventional position, like something in the back. But again, I don't know why you'd want to break up that back line. So really, the starting slots on this roster seem full. So what I think they'll want to do is they want to play out the first 15 to 20 games, get themselves to the summer, and if they have another need, to go out and get another DP with, they'll go out and make that spend in the summer, or they can fill on the margins if they feel like they're feeling all pretty with the way that they've gone through the first 15 to 20 games. It's an enviable spot to be in, and I think again it shows shrewdness and planning, and it shows also that they expect to win this year, and I think that's why they've looked at the roster the way they have.
Well, Patrick Agyemang's probably given him even more confidence. What has it been like to watch him, start, sub in, and most notably score twice for the men's national team this week?
Well, it was a special moment, firstly, to see Tim Ream be a U.S. men's national team player representing Charlotte FC, last year. That was really kind of cool. This has a different kind of coolness to it because Patrick feels like somebody who we've watched grow, obviously from the Super Draft, and somebody who, Charlotte FC players and fans have all kind of grown accustomed to seeing on the front foot and doing his thing. I think last year was a very big confidence booster for him. The way that Dean Smith gave him those reps down the stretch in the most important moments. The fact that he set a DP in a playoff game to have him be the man to start. And I think that's something you look at and say is not lost on him from a confidence standpoint. And I think he's taken that and ran with it when you think about the way that he's played in this U.S. Men's national team camp. 2 goals in 2 games. I mean, and they were 2 different goals. And he also created another goal scoring opportunity. Should have gotten a chance to take that penalty early on against Venezuela over the weekend, but for whatever reason, Matko Miljevic is the one who took it. I have no idea why, because it was a meekly taken penalty, but that's a story for another day. But you see how dangerous he can be. And it's such a gratifying thing because he's doing the things for the U.S. men's national team that he's doing for Charlotte FC. He has great hold-up play. He's got an ability to get the ball past defenders. He's a load to defend. And he's got an incredible strike from either foot. It's so great to see. I understand that for a lot of people, it's not the full U.S. men's camp, and the striker position is the deepest position in the U.S. men's national team profile right now. But if I'm Mauricio Pochettino, I'm calling him up when the window opens back up here in March, April, June, because of the fact that I think that you're going to see a lot of competition over the next couple of months for who wants to be on this team for Mauricio Pochettino, and very few have been able to do it in front of him in a game action. I understand that you got to think about Father Balogun, you got to think about Ricardo Pepi, you got to think about Gio Reyna and all these other guys, but he staked a claim, and I think that's all you could ask for the guy. I think he's going to find himself in a U.S. men's national team camp here pretty soon again, and I'm so excited for him because nobody deserves it from him. He's put in the work.
Talk about his future with Charlotte FC, and I'll just start with the near future. What does this season, or could this season, look like for Patrick Agyemang?
Hopefully it's a continuation of what we saw down the stretch of the past year. I think he's got the ability to score double-digit goals. I think he's got the ability, because of what is around him, to be in more dangerous areas. I think Zaha is going to create a lot of open space for him because I think now he finally has somebody on the field at the same time as him that requires maximum attention. And that's not to say that Abada or Vargas didn't, but you basically have a situation where the defense has to decide who they want to double. They can't double both Zaha and Agyemang. And if you put Agyemang on single coverage, good luck. Because you've seen against single coverage, he knows how to beat a man off the ball. He knows how to beat a man with a dink. He knows how to beat a man with a boot strength. And he also knows how to also sustain contact. I mean, there's probably no player in the league that gets more contact than that guy does, and uncalled contact, I should say, because we were seeing it during the Venezuela game about how he was continuing to get mauled by guys, and it still not get called. It's weird how those things continue to be unfortunate side effects of his game. But I think he can definitely be somebody who's on the minds of people when you're looking at some of the year-end awards. I can tell you right now, the people who cover the game love the guy. I mean, Andrew Wiebe of MLS Season Pass has basically called himself the man of the Agyemang Hive. Tom Bogert, MLS reporter for Soccer Wise and Give Me Sport, is a big Agyemang fan as well. I heard Brian Dunseth talking about him on the TNT broadcast. Sasha Klesjan loves him too. I mean, all these guys who carry big voices in the MLS sphere love this guy. And as long as he puts up the numbers, he's going to keep getting talked about. Hopefully, it turns himself also into a big contract with Charlotte FC. I know that's a big talking point when it comes to fans and supporters. I know that the organization feels very strongly about him. They want to keep him here. They want to make sure that he is taken care of fully. I think they just want to see that same start to the season the way that he ended last year. And if that happens, I think you'll be seeing something in the neighborhood of a contract extension being levied for him come the middle of the season.
Now, that's my next question. Anytime in Charlotte, I think we see one of our players ascending and being a shooting star, not just a rising star, we wonder, oh, they're going to leave. What's the path forward with Agyemang? You think you mentioned a possible extension. Could he rise into that DP slot role? What are some of the options and timelines you could see happening?
It's I'm not going to say it never happens, but someone who goes from being a homegrown player to a designated player is not something that happens often in Major League Soccer. Now, he fits the profile of somebody you can actually happen with, and if he turns into that player, then Charlotte FC is going to be ecstatic. But I also think too, if he gets to that level, then he's also going to have the eyes of people overseas starting to come his way, and uh, I'm not sure if he's gotten any concrete offers or serious offers yet, but I think what happened here in the U.S. men's national team camp and what has happened so far, it's got to at least touch the eyes of people overseas and make that happen. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess for Charlotte FC, it could be a boon for them financially to maybe have him go elsewhere. But I think from the standpoint of where they sit, they want to get some more mileage out of Patrick Agyemang. They want Patrick Agyemang to hoist an MLS Cup trophy, and they want to be able to keep him here for the foreseeable future. I know that there will obviously be the draw of a lot of players on this roster to potentially get overseas call-ups and mentions. Adilson Malanda was the name that was kind of the hot name over the winter as well in terms of that effect. The fact that he is still here, I think, is also a testament to how much he wants to be here. But Patrick Agyemang's always been a guy, when we've talked to him about money, he's always like, look, my agent handles that stuff. It's not me. I want to play soccer. So I think he's got the right attitude about it. I expect him to be in a Charlotte FC uniform for this season and for the foreseeable future. And hopefully he's doing things on a high level that allows him to put Charlotte FC on a bigger map than they are currently.
Well, expectations are now enormous with Agyemang's ascension and also Zaha, obviously. So I don't know, Willie P, what your tea dosage is in the pregame, but you may want to think about doubling it for this season.
I'm not going to talk for the rest of the night, Nick, because I'm going into hermit mode so that I can be fully energized about a month from now when we're up in Seattle for the season opener against the Seattle Sounders for a little MLS After Dark.
All right. Well, we'll see you in over a month then, buddy.
Thank
Cut
you,
the
Nick.
lights off,
Appreciate
turn
you.
down.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.